Hey, church, welcome to another episode of Afterthought. I'm Sam.
I'm Greg.
And we're going to be breaking down Greg's message from not yesterday, because today's Tuesday, but
Yep.
we're breaking it down from Sunday, out of Matthew 20, verses 1 through 16. Jesus' somewhat unnerving parable about the tenants and the workers in the vineyard.
Hey, I love before we get into it that it was important that we have integrity, that we don't insinuate it was yesterday when it actually wasn't.
No, integrity is the foundation of what this is.
Yeah, if you don't have truth as a foundation,
No.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing. All right. So in this parable, Jesus he gives this story about a guy who hires people to work in his vineyard. He hires some guys at dawn, and they agree on payment, and then he hires some guys at midday, and then some guys at the very end of the day. The landowner pays all of them kind of in the reverse order that they were hired, but they all get paid the same. The first people to get hired get really upset that they've been there all day and are getting paid the same as the people who just showed up. And Jesus likens this to life in the kingdom. Says those who are first will be last, last will be first. And your message, your first point of the message, really, when I was listening to the podcast, because I wasn't here on Sunday, sick kid and all, but really kind of stuck out to me in the car. It was that salvation is not a reward, it's a gift. And I think so often it's easy to fall into this sort of lifestyle expectation where we think God owes us something. And this is what the landowner said. He's like, hey, to people who he hired at the very first part of the day, he's like, we agreed on payment, so I'm paying you what we agreed upon. Like, if I make a deal with these guys that I just hired, it's my money.
right? What does it matter to you?
Yeah. Which, maybe we can get into it a little bit later, but even at the end of the Gospel of John, when Peter's like,
What about these guys?
what about these guys? And Jesus is like, what's that to you? That's none of your business. And so it's easy to walk around with this sense of entitlement, but I think what your first point was is such a great reminder that, hey, your whole life is grace. Your whole life is mercy. Like, God doesn't owe you anything. And
Right.
if God did owe you something, it's not something you would want.
So I think a really good question is why? Why do we feel that way? What is it about us? And I do think that it's a very Western thought. Why do we feel that sense of entitlement, or why do we feel that sense of competition? Because in reality, think about every part of our life. We get rewarded for what we do. You go to work, you get rewarded for the hours you put in. If you're in an industry like commission, you get rewarded for what you sell.
Yeah.
You eat what you kill. The harder you work, the more you get rewarded for it. And so, really, in every part of society, we do it with our kids. I told this story about Upwards.
Yep.
Shout out to Katie.
Shout out Upwards. Never mind.
Yeah. No. But again, that reveals something in my heart. Like that, Yvonne was reminding me at lunch that, hey, there are parents that don't have the most athletic kid. They just want them to have a team experience, and they put them in there for that reason. And, and so why shouldn't everybody get a trophy? And I'm like, babe.
That's great. Could they put that in their marketing material so that people who are competitive know that on the front end?
Hey, that triggered every part of me,
Yeah.
every competitive part of me that no, that's not how this works.
Y'all might not be keeping score, but I am.
Well, and the only way that there's a winner is if there's a loser, right?
Yes.
I mean, there is winning and losing, and we do. So where I would stand on that is we do want to teach our kids the value of losing well and learning how to deal with adversity. And there are so many things that we learn well through sports.
Failure is like the primary teacher in life.
Right.
And even in stuff like if you go to the gym, you're supposed to work out your sets till failure. That's where the muscle growth starts. So it's
Right.
like if we're always avoiding failure, we're avoiding growth.
Right. But to get back to the point of,
We could rabbit trail that for a while.
Yeah, I could take this for a while. But the point is, thank God that he doesn't view it that way. Because if we were living if the spiritual life was meritocracy, where where it's all about either time served or the harder I work, the more I get, we would constantly be downing each other to get there. We would be clawing our way to the top, and unfortunately, that is what a lot of faith outside of Christianity. Christianity is the only world religion where God comes down. Every other world religion is you got to work your way up. It is works based. It's based on my merit. I get a bigger reward, and Christianity says you could never get there, and you were never meant to.
And if anything, like, so I'm preaching this Sunday on the following passage, but it's like Jesus comes down, but it's like we almost kind of we catch each other in passing. He's on his way down, and he's like, "Follow me down." Like, I'm not calling you to go up. I'm calling you actually to go down. And that's
which on the surface makes no sense.
But in the upside down kingdom, going down is actually going up.
That's it. That's it. And so, I mentioned on Sunday, I would say that one of the key verses that says it in a nutshell is Ephesians 2:8 and 9. It's not, for it's by grace you have been saved through faith, not of yourselves. It is a gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. Because as soon as merit enters the picture where salvation is concerned, then I get some of the credit.
Yeah.
And so all I'm doing is minimizing the grace and generosity of God.
And the inverse is true as well. If it's grace plus some of your effort, then yeah, you have bragging rights if you're doing well. But also, if you're not doing well, everything's hanging in the balance now.
Right.
And that's scary because, I know for me, things aren't awesome all the time.
Right.
And if my salvation or if my standing before God, my position is like a co-heir with Christ, if that's always on the line, that's a lot of fear.
And that's where these two streams of faith, and on one pole is Calvinism, on the other pole is Arminianism, where either there's nothing I can ever do to lose my salvation, which is a biblical concept, that you get over in Arminian world where, man, if I tell a lie, I've lost my salvation. If I, the whole idea of that there's something I can do to lose it, where the part that doesn't make sense to me where that's concerned is, well, there's nothing you did to gain it. So now you're saying there's nothing you did to gain it, but there's something you can do to lose it. That doesn't add up. And so, when we think about the reward of salvation is Jesus.
Yes.
And it's the reward, but it's also the gift. And what I bring to the table is my yes. I bring my brokenness, and so we talked a little bit on Sunday about the thief on the cross in Luke 23, and he is the primary example of the 11th hour worker.
Greatest buzzer beater ever.
Rip thief on the cross.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he shows us that, hey, it is not as tight and formulaic as we've made it. He did not repent. He didn't. Jesus didn't say, "Hey, pray this prayer with me, and you'll be in paradise with me." He saw the guy's heart, and all the guy said was, "Hey, remember me. Remember me. Remember me when you come to your kingdom."
Even before that, though, the thief on the cross told the other thief on the cross, like, "Why are you jeering this guy? He doesn't deserve to be here. You and I deserve this." Like, this recognition of, like, yeah, I'm sinful. Like, I screwed up. I'm in this current position that I'm in because of what I've done. And so, I mean, he didn't even ask for grace. Just, would you remember me?
Yeah, just remember me.
But like you said, Jesus sees the heart, and yeah, I mean.
And so, if I always talk about finding yourself in the story, but when we find ourselves in this story, we're always the 11th hour guy.
Mm-hmm.
And you made a point before we started the podcast that this is a picture of Gentile inclusion.
Yeah,
Tease that out a little bit.
Yeah, so Paul talks about, I want to say it's in Romans, and when he says, like, to the Jews belong the promises, the covenants, like all of these things. And you and I and any Gentile watching this, our history with God is a lot shorter and a lot more new than the Jewish history with God. And so we are grafted in to a history that doesn't belong to us. We are the 11th hour workers showing up, literally getting all the benefits, getting all the promises, getting all the covenants, getting all of those things that other people have stewarded for much longer than we've been around.
So we joke a lot around the office because right out a year ago, you started a Bible study with a group of young adults, and y'all are walking through the Old Testament.
Yep.
And so you're OT, right? And you have a passion for the Old Testament, and which is so great because if the Old Testament doesn't exist, the New Testament doesn't make sense. And you look at all of the references, Jesus is constantly taking the Old Testament, the law, and bringing it forward, and in some ways redeeming it, some ways redefining it, but he's having to redefine it because it existed.
Yes.
And so we can't look at the Old Testament and go, well, it's not practical for my everyday life.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, maybe not, but if it doesn't exist, the New Testament doesn't really mean a lot.
Yeah.
Because Jesus is redeeming something.
Well, and all the things that promised a Messiah, it's like if there's no Old Testament, then like who is Jesus?
Yeah. I mean, all of it, we've got to get to a point where we recognize the validity of something bigger than ourselves and something bigger than, just the New Testament books. We need the Old Testament. And so
it's important that Matthew starts with the genealogy.
Right.
It's like, hey, just in case you forgot, this has been a long story up until right now.
Right. And so it's a call for us to recognize that the Bible's bigger. And the Old Testament, we got to dig into it. It's rich in history.
Yeah.
And it is the life that we've been grafted into.
And so going back to what you were saying earlier about us being the 11th hours workers, the problem is that we are the 11th hour workers, but we have the attitude of being the people that were hired at 6 a.m.
Right.
And because I bet in the story, if they were to make this into a movie or if The Chosen were to adopt that into a thing, I bet the people who showed up at the 11th hour are super stoked that they got paid what they got paid.
Oh, well, and I said it Sunday, because of the way he paid out, you made this point earlier. If the first that were there got paid first, they're outie. They're gone.
They would have never known that the thing wasn't fair.
Yeah, they're not concerned at all because they got paid what they knew they were going to get paid. If I'm on the other end of it, it's not until I get paid do I get disgruntled because I'm doing the math. They get paid, and all I'm thinking is I'm about to get paid 12 times what I thought I was going to get paid. Because 6 a.m., the parable says he got people at 9, at noon, at 3, and then at 5 o'clock. So I'm doing the math going, oh, this dude has renegotiated my contract.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so to think about that entitlement of I agreed to something, if I get paid more, what a blessing that would be. What an unexpected blessing. Instead of, well, I got paid what I was told I was going to get paid. What a blessing in that. The guy made good on his promise.
Yeah. Yeah. And to me, this story kind of reminds me of the parable of the prodigal son, the older brother and younger brother, where the dad's like, hey, you've been here the whole time. Like, if you wanted to party, all you had to do is ask.
Right.
Like,
Right.
and why do you have a problem with me doing what I want with what's mine?
Yeah.
And so going to your story, you talked about later in your message about the story of comparison and your second point about how comparison, when we compare ourselves to others, we cheapen the generosity of God. When we have a problem when God does what he wants with what's his, I think that reveals something in our hearts that we don't always like to see. You know, you told this story about a friend that you know getting a bunch of outside ministry opportunities while you're sitting in your office, and you feel like, you know, maybe the cards weren't dealt to you in a way that you
Right.
would have liked. Or
And you and I have talked about this before as a musician, seeing other people being promoted.
drives you crazy.
Yeah. And when in my mind, when my point of reference is this is making it. You know, when I begin, I set the goalpost, I'm never going to be satisfied.
What people fail to realize, and what I fail to realize, is comparison is a disease of the heart, and you never graduate from it. You can't success your way out of comparison. You just move the target.
Right.
So, like, let's say you make it up the next step in the ladder, and you think, well, now that's gonna fill this inner deficiency I have. No, it won't. You're just gonna look at whoever's on the next step, and now you're gonna be right back in the place you started from internally.
I was talking with somebody this morning, and he was talking about, you know, he bought his first house, and he had a rainy day fund in a savings account of $5,000. And he said, one day he looked, and there was $3,500 in the account, and he started getting anxious because he needed to build it back up. He was telling me just recently he had an account that had $800,000 in that account.
Okay.
And he had been spending, and it got down to $500,000, and he had the exact same feeling that he had when he had $5,000. And he said it never changed. The amount changed, and what he was communicating is, man, in that mindset, it's never enough.
No, the goalpost will always move.
He never dreamed on the day that he had $5,000 in his savings account that there'd be a day that he'd be stressed about $500,000. And I'm like, man, I would love to be stressed about that.
Yeah, can I get in that line? I love that.
But it does reveal that that it's not the answer.
No, we deceive ourselves into thinking that we'll cross this threshold where I won't have to deal with that anymore. But the
Right.
problem is we don't realize that the more stuff, the more money, the more possessions, the more position,
The
it
more
just means
notoriety.
it just means the stakes are higher.
Right.
Like,
And again, when I was processing it with the Lord, when I felt him say, so pastoring a growing church isn't enough. That's the first pause of like, that just feels so ugly. And even saying it out loud, I think in second service I was like, I know that many people are like, you're a pastor, you know, because it reveals an ugly side to me that I don't like. But the next part was even the more when I felt him say, remember where you were when I found you. I was coming out of the biggest season of brokenness of my life. The last thing I deserve, even today, is to be where I am. And
no one asks a question like the Lord, man. His questions just.
And you know, when I say, man, I do not deserve to be here, he respectfully agrees.
Yeah.
And that's what makes his grace so beautiful. And so when we look at this parable is not about the workers, it's about the landowner. And when we start focusing on the workers and which one are we miss the point that all of them were in need of grace. Him coming and finding those guys at the 11th hour, that was grace. He could have called it a day and just started over the next day. And so we don't need to focus on, well, which worker are you? No, it's the graciousness, the radical generosity of the landowner. We serve a God who loves us so far beyond what we can ever ask or think. And we have so much, so much. And even if you're listening today and you feel like you've got little, compared to the rest of the world, you've got a lot. And if you're living and breathing, that is the grace of God, you know, that we have been given so much. And the gift of salvation is at the top of the list.
Yeah. So I wonder if, as we land the plane for the episode, if the takeaway for those watching I know we often ask questions like, okay, how can you integrate what we're talking about into your life? For me, I feel like the takeaway is I need humility to make space for gratitude. Because really, the entitlement that we talk about when we associate ourselves with one of the workers, it's just pride. And so I need humility. And obviously, like what you're saying about God being generous and everything is grace, that like, then my response should be nothing but gratitude.
Right.
So, for me, I'm going to leave this podcast taping or not taping. 'Cause
Yeah.
we don't tape anymore.
Yeah. Whatever this is.
Yeah, whatever this is. The thing I'm chewing on is like, what do I have that I need to be grateful for? What am I not grateful for that I should probably reframe as like, man, think like even the problems that I have are blessings from the Lord, you know?
Yeah, and I think if we could get to that place, first of all, it's countercultural. Everything in our environment is fighting against that. Like our culture fights against gratitude.
Yeah.
It fights for entitlement. And so to live that way, to live with a heart of gratitude, just being grateful for what I have. And it doesn't mean that I don't continue to professionally work hard. It's not a call to just sit back and, man, God's just going to give it to me. There's nothing I need to do. Just like it would be, there's nothing I can do to earn or lose salvation, so I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, and I want to specify too, when I'm saying to like be grateful for even the difficult things in life, I don't want that to come across as callous for people that are like going through real loss and pain, like to just just choose joy and be grateful.
Yeah.
But like there is,
I think anyone that knows your story specifically, especially where Harper is concerned, dude, you've been through it.
Yeah.
So,
I just want to be,
Yeah.
But gratitude should be our kind of resting disposition in life.
If we start there, a lot of really, really good things flow from it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, church, as we finish today's episode, we just want to encourage you to maybe ask the Lord to give you the grace to have more humility, because I think we all have room to be more humble. I know I certainly do. Is to ask the Lord for grace for more humility in your life, and for that humility to make space for more gratitude, that you could learn to recognize the ways in which God has been radically generous to you in your own life.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll see you next week.
See ya.